I think that there's no denying that there's a large chunk of the Star Wars fans that really shifted away from the franchise after the release of both The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker by Disney and Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, and what she did to the franchise. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, one thing about the Star Wars franchise that we do know is that currently Disney and Lucasfilm are trying whatever they can in order to reunite the fans and to really gain the trust of the lost fans from the franchise after The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. Now, granted, you guys know my take on Episode 9. I think it's an entertaining movie at best, with a lot of flaws in the mix. There's a lot of scenes that I love and hate. It's like an emotional roller coaster, as I usually say. I don't hate the movie entirely, not nearly as much as The Last Jedi in any way, but it's an entertaining movie at best. That's about it. I don't think it's a great Star Wars film. I don't think it's outstanding, but I think it's doable. I really do. But it has a lot of problems in there. It really does. A lot of big problems and flaws. So, with Kathleen Kennedy, alright, a lot of fans have been intrigued about this, is that the future of this franchise really seems to be very interesting, because now that Kathleen Kennedy no longer has control over the creative decisions of these Star Wars projects, such as the Kenobi series, the Star Wars Rebels sequel series that's in the works, we have the Rise of Skywalker series in the coming years, the sequel series, if you will, in animated form, and a lot more than that, such as The Mandalorian Season 2, and so on and so forth. Now, what's really intriguing about all of this has to do with Kathleen Kennedy, and what's really intriguing is that now that both Disney and Lucasfilm are finished with the Skywalker saga, they are moving on to their new Star Wars trilogy and their new Star Wars universe, where it's noted that The Rise of Skywalker had a very tough production because of Kathleen Kennedy with the rewrites and the reshoots of the film. Now, it's noted that Kathleen Kennedy was very unhappy with the box office results of the film, only just making above $1 billion at the box office worldwide, and that Kathleen Kennedy was very frustrated with the fans who boycotted Episode 9, and how the fans did not engage in as many repeat viewings for the film. Now, it's noted that Kennedy is also frustrated with how fans had an issue with The Last Jedi and Rian Johnson's direction, and how that caused a very tough production for The Rise of Skywalker by making difficult decisions on what would be best to satisfy the Star Wars fans. Now, it's explained that currently that Kathleen Kennedy is only involved in developing the roadmap of future Star Wars projects, such as films and TV shows, and that Bob Iger is currently looking for a replacement as head of Lucasfilm next year for 2021, where The Last Jedi backlash from the fans is said to have caused Kathleen Kennedy to become annoyed with the Star Wars fandom on what works best for the Star Wars franchise to make a successful Star Wars movie, and that this is why Kathleen Kennedy made the decision to create a small hiatus on Star Wars movies. Kennedy was said to have proposed the idea to Bob Iger to put a halt on Star Wars films back in 2019 because of the Star Wars fans, because she was also afraid of the fans' impact on the Star Wars brand and more. Now, Kennedy did this out of fear to save Lucasfilm and to save the franchise, to give more time and focus on a new mythology for Bob Iger to choose new creatives and more. So, the thing about Kathleen Kennedy here is that obviously she was not the correct decision by George Lucas, and one could argue that this is also partially George's fault. I can't really say that it's George's fault because he really didn't know what Kathleen Kennedy was going to do, and he trusted Kathleen Kennedy, and Kathleen Kennedy gave George her word that she was going to take care of these characters. So, what else was George, led to believe? Anybody could have said that, right? Now, at the very least, yes, he could have chose somebody who was more in tune with Star Wars as a brand, who really knew, Star Wars legends and how the characters should be used. But at the time, it was the decision that George needed to make. Now, when we look at what Kathleen Kennedy has done, the fact that, she's been very frustrated over the box office results, it's very similar to what happened with Solo. Not to that extent, but it's very similar, because with Solo: A Star Wars Story, that was like a box office bomb. Meanwhile, with The Rise of Skywalker, they expected to see double the amount. They didn't even get near as that much. They expected more around the lines of $2 billion worldwide at the box office, where they were a little under $1 billion less. They were like 900 and something, $1 million under of what they wanted to do. So, that's the thing here, is that they really wanted to make this movie as successful as some of the big Marvel movies like Endgame and such, and it didn't really nearly get as much. Now, one would argue that yes, the third film of a lot of trilogies or franchises out there tend to be the lowest. Of course, if they're in the form of a trilogy. There's a lot of evidence out there that there's a lot of trilogy franchises out there that the third film gains the less, and that's a known fact. But there's also a lot of franchises out there that have a third film that gain the most. So it's not really a good thing to point at. When we look at Kathleen Kennedy, however, there's been a lot of decisions, like reshoots and rewrites, that played a major role in all of this. And the fact that she's afraid of the Star Wars fans, and that caused her to create a hiatus on Star Wars movies, you can see that she's very much, not confident in the Star Wars brand. So anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.